Our goal is to set up a Raspberry Pi computer and use Node-RED to make a simple MQTT Internet of Things program that sends a message to our social support system. Now, we will define a social support system as two or more people who can work together to solve challenges. We will also work on resilience. Resilience is developing the skills needed to help us manage stress. So we will use technology to help us better understand technology, and also how resilience and social support can be powerful tools in helping us deal with challenges. What challenges? Well, we're going to look at 3. Setting up the Raspberry Pi as a system of components, using Node-RED to create a simple program, and finally using Node-RED to explore the Internet of Things. Our first challenge is setting up the Raspberry Pi computer. Now, as we work through this STEM exercise, we want to work with several important concepts: defining the concept of a system, understanding the roles that different elements play within a system by comparing the Raspberry Pi to that of a social support system, and applying positive coping skills to improve resilience. Let's look to defining a system. When making a technology system, the elements within the system need to work together, and there needs to be the human part of this challenge to include social support. Do you agree that working with others to deal with difficult challenges can be helpful? If you were to work with another person on this challenge, who would you pick? Why would you pick this person? So find someone to work with to help you solve this challenge. So our challenge is to set up a Raspberry Pi system. We might think of this as a 4-step process, a checklist whereby the 4 steps are completed. We have met a goal of setting up the Raspberry Pi computer system. We, of course, want to believe we're going to be successful in meeting this challenge. And if we believe we can be successful with this, then it's likely our attitude will be more favorable. Belief is a positive coping skill that makes us more resilient. We can build belief in ourselves by learning to persist. Persistence is facing a challenge with the belief we will succeed. One way to persist is by creating a realistic goal to meet the challenge and the steps needed to reach the goal. Persistence is a positive coping skill that makes us more resilient. So let's look at step 1. The system hardware in this example includes a Raspberry Pi 3 single-board computer, a USB connected keyboard, a USB connected mouse, a 5-volt 3-ampere Raspberry Pi power supply, an HDMI monitor or TV with HDMI cable, and minimally an 8 gigabyte or larger micro SD card. Now be sure the micro SD card comes with an SD card adapter so you can plug it into the SD card slot in a computer. So yeah, we're going to need another Windows, Macintosh, or Linux computer for part of this setup. A computer typically requires an operating system or set of instructions that tell it how to interact with us. Raspberry Pi can use a number of different operating systems to adapt to our differing needs. The Raspberry operating system installation program is packaged as Noobs, along with a host of useful application programs. A link to the free Noobs download is provided in the description. Now, Noobs is over 2 gigabytes in size, so it may take some time to download depending upon your speeds. A micro SD card will hold Noobs for running the Raspberry Pi, so we need to prepare the micro SD card for receiving Noobs. To do this, download and install a free formatting app, such as SD Memory Card Formatter. Install it and start SD Formatter and place your micro SD card in its adapter and into the appropriate slot of your computer. Notice that the default name is Recovery, although you can use anything you wish. Once the SD card is formatted, copy Noobs files by first unzipping the downloaded folder and then copying the contents of the folder onto the SD card. Notice we're copying the files in the folder to the SD card and not the folder. Let's put together the hardware needed to create the system. Now that the micro SD card has the installation software needed for the Raspberry Pi, the card is inserted into the micro SD card slot on the underside of the Raspberry Pi. With the micro SD card inserted, the remaining components are connected. These include the mouse and keyboard, monitor and cable, and the power supply. Now, don't plug the power supply in quite yet, not until you're ready to complete the software installation. In this example, a Raspberry Pi 3 is being connected to a 7-inch touchscreen monitor. Both the Raspberry Pi and monitor are housed in a Smarty Pi stand. Links to these resources are provided in the description. Once all the hardware is connected, the installation of the operating system, or Raspbian, and application software is completed. Start by powering up the Raspberry Pi by plugging it into the wall socket. This process of installation can take over an hour, and during this time you're going to be prompted for some information that will allow you to better communicate with the Raspberry Pi. The installation will begin with resizing the file allocation table, or FAT, on the SD card. Next, we're going to see the default installation menu. Although the mouse is used on this menu, the language and keyboard can also be set up, and this is helpful, particularly if you're using an unusual keyboard. Make sure at least the Raspbian is checked, although LibreElect can also be installed to use the Raspberry Pi as a media center. The Wi-Fi can also be set up now or later in the installation process. If you do connect it now, additional operating systems will appear on the menu. Click on the Install to continue. Once the operating system is installed, the interface, or how the operating system will communicate with you, is defined. So as the operating system is reaching out to you, you must also reach out to it in order to better communicate. So we'll set the country, language, and time zone. In this example, I have indicated United States, American English, and a Southwestern time zone. You also have the option of changing the password and changing the appearance of the startup screen. Finally, the software update required about an hour and 15 minutes to do, although this will vary upon your internet connection speeds. Let's return to our questions. 1. Define the concept of a system. How would you define a system in your own words? 2. Understand the roles that different elements play within a system by comparing a Raspberry Pi system to that of a social support system. Now, did each component you use to put together a Raspberry Pi system have a role to play? When all of these elements worked together, was the system successful? Faced with a personal challenge, how would you pick people to help you to work and solve the challenge? 3. Apply positive coping skills to improve resilience. So, what resilience skills did you use? What made the skill of persistence work for you? Did you find you went through a belief change resulting in a more confident attitude? Did you need to reach out and work with someone, trust, to be more successful? Did you find yourself adapting to different ways of doing things to make the system work? Finally, think about how much time was needed to make a technology system work. What does this suggest to you when you're facing a personal challenge and need to use a social support system to better deal with that challenge?